Marriage is a complicated subject, and I'm sure those of you who are married can attest to that. Others listening may be considering marriage, be engaged, or maybe some of you are marriage abolitionists, but we can all agree that this is a complicated subject, historically and within our modern world. Within Dark Souls, we're shown one explicit representation of marriage through the character of Anri. It's a marriage that directly involves us, and it highlights the complications of the subject. Though we don't stab each other in modern ceremonies, as far as I'm aware, this union can be analysed as purposeful commentary, not just as a strange fantasy concept. We can ask, what love exists in this partnership, if any? Whose body is being used to further another's goals? What societal pressures have led to the requirement of a betrothed in order to become lord? What societal pressures of our own can we see reflected through this ceremony? Much like my breakdown on motherhood, today we'll be delving into very specific subject matter. Anri is a fantastic device to examine marriage as a concept because we can get both a male and female perspective because, as we know, Anri is both man and woman. Now please do remember to subscribe, comment your thoughts, and let's begin with what I do best, analysing FromSoft from a feminine viewpoint. We meet Anri and her companion Horus at the Road of Sacrifices, which is fitting considering her future role. We learn that they are on the road to seek Lord Aldrich, and through various item descriptions we can put together that these two are the only survivors of Aldrich's cannibalistic rule, wherein he presumably ate his own children, the children mothered by Rosaria. But in Dark Souls fashion, nothing good happens to the allies you make along the way. Anri loses Horus in Karthus, who soon turns hollow, and from here the questline opens up into two paths. You can make your way to Aldrich and defeat him with Anri, who soon turns hollow and hostile, or you can make her your bride. In order to reach that destination though, you'll have to have been following the path to become the Lord of Hollows. I'm not going to fully explore the themes and such from this ending, I think I'll leave that for a future video involving Yuria, but I'll say that this ending is, in my opinion, the worst one you can choose. By claiming the flame and snuffing it out for the rest of history, you are simply becoming the next Gwyn, this time elevating darkness, still denying the world's natural cycle, wherein darkness and flame rise and fall throughout history. But regardless, today the most relevant aspect of this ending is its involvement in our marriage. Yuria tells us that we must have a betrothed. It's a requirement, not an option, nor a delicate choice, but a necessary obligation. Why is that? Let's first consider the historical lens. One of the main reasons for marriage, particularly for a lord or anyone of higher society, was to conceive a male heir. Not to have a child together, not to love said child and your family, but to have a son to pass your property on to. I highly doubt you need me to tell you that this traditional marriage is rooted in patriarchal power. It allowed women to be acquired as property and constantly kept under male supervision, used for domestic labour and kept as secondary citizens. Considering the fact our ascension is merely a mild twisting of Gwyn's system, which is very easily defined as patriarchal, we can assume Anri will be expected to conform to traditional feminine expectations. Assuming the Ashen One can even have children, it would be pertinent to secure a lineage to continue your rule and keep the Age of Darkness intact and in your image, just as Gwyn did. In order to own the land, you need extensions of yourself, and this is where family is most useful for a lord. But a betrothed would also be necessary simply for image's sake. In order to appear as a powerful leader, the new Gwyn, you must have a relationship approved by tradition, approved by your community of Londor. The Lord of Hollows is no revolutionist, you're simply echoing past institutions and systems. This, of course, wouldn't be an ideal situation for a female Anri, as it wouldn't for any woman historically, but in general, through the historic viewpoint, Yuria insisting you marry is simply her enforcing tradition upon you, moulding you into the ideal replacement. Marriage is the one true form of relationship. It offers social recognition, and in order to have upward mobility, you must be a socially recognized individual. How can you expect to become lord and form the land in your image if you can't appeal to your subjects' deeply ingrained social expectations? But let's ask, what about marriage today? Is Yuria's push for our union simply a reflection of history, or does marriage still remain deeply patriarchal and the sole site of socially recognized relations? Well, the institution of marriage is still a constraining and oppressive system. I doubt many of us are lords looking for an heir, but we are members of a society that pushes us to conform to marriage for social and legal benefits. Putting aside the feminine viewpoint for a moment, marriage is still regarded as the true moral relationship for all by the state, just as it's regarded as such by the state of Londor. Elizabeth Blake named the societal focus on marital and, in general, exclusive amorous relationships as amatonormativity. These societally ideal relationships are considered special sites of value, providing legal and social benefits to those who conform. This is very much alive in our modern day. Especially in the US, marriage is considered a special site of social value. We are conditioned from a young age to desire marriage, to desire this special moral relationship, and the gender roles that come with it. It's simply an extension of tradition, primarily influenced by Christian notions. The pressure to get married is still a deeply ingrained reality. Women and men alike are taught to feel ashamed of reaching a certain age unmarried. Your social status will be questioned by the state and by your peers if you do not conform to this system. Certainly, we have less strict expectations in 2026, but to be an unmarried adult is often to be looked upon with skepticism, and to sway from gender roles is thought to be a temporary lapse in judgment. Amatonormativity dictates that love between a married man and woman is the true special site where love can flourish. To not have experienced that or to downright avoid it will put your social standing in question. Marriage indicating social standing is not a faraway historical fact, it affects us to this day. And why exactly is that? Why does marriage still hold such high social value despite many people proving that it isn't a one-size-fits-all blueprint? Why do our unions have to be sanctioned by the state, as they are in Londor? Why does the state vehemently push for marriage? And why is it easier to get married than to get divorced? Because the status quo, patriarchy, and the continued rule of the elite is much easier digested through family values and by those who accept the state's power over their unions. Marriage today is still tradition, and tradition in the West is the upkeep of white supremacy, patriarchy, capitalism, among other oppressive systems, all of which are commented on within Dark Souls. Just as marriage is a tool to upkeep the status quo in Londor, so it is in our world. Amatonormativity makes it easier to confine us to the systems that hurt us. I have to ask, if we believe Londor should have no influence over who we choose to marry, that the state should be uninvolved in our relationships, why do we accept this in our modern day? But overall, there are certainly differences between a marriage made in the 1500s and a marriage made today. But marriage as a whole has not been significantly reformed to the point that it's no longer an oppressive, patriarchal system that pushes people into potentially harmful conformity. Let's ask, are marital relations really special sites of value, or are they pressured and crushed by long-standing traditions, confining divorce laws, and the feeling that you're sacrificing yourself to another? That's quite a general look at how the links between marriage and social standing remain relevant to us today. Before we delve further into the feminine perspective on this, though, I want to make note of the fact that I'm not a marriage abolitionist. In fact, I'm someone who wants to be in a monogamous marriage, but I don't accept the fairy tale we've been told about the special moral implications of such a union, because said fairy tale isn't based on our individual freedom and love, it's based on the upkeep of oppressive systems. I think our marriage to Anri highlights this reality particularly well. It shows us marriage as a blatant sacrifice done to enable social movement and the continuation of tradition. And with all of that established, let's take a look specifically at the female perspective on marriage. Let's start with a direct look at the marital ceremony itself, but I don't think it needs much analysis. Anri is placed on a sacrificial slab, lifeless. You marry her atop a grave, stabbing her as an act of consummation, which I suppose could be read as analogy, and siphoning her dark sigils in the process. She is in a completely vulnerable position, literally dead, her body and will completely under your control. Though, for her, this is more a state of temporary unconsciousness, because, like us, she has the reanimating curse of the undead. Thus, she can be compared more literally to real women in similar positions, an arranged marriage made without her consideration. For these women, marriage may as well be made and, sadly, consummated, whilst they're unconscious. They have no say in this situation, just as Anri doesn't. They are treated as warm bodies for their husband's social needs, but if a cold body could bear children, perhaps she'd be preferable for men in such marriages. Anri is a necessary sacrifice for your ascension, and though she comes back to life, she does not come back your equal. We see her in the final cutscene, bowing in the crowd with the rest of Londor, not your partner but another follower, subservient and beneath you. Women throughout history have been subjugated by marriage as a whole. They've had to fight for the right to be considered equal partners, not property. They've had to fight to have their voice considered at all. Thus, the historical lens seems easy to agree on. Anri doesn't seem a far-off representation of what previous generations have been put through. However, plenty of people argue that marriage today is not like this anymore, but that is simply not the case. This system has not been reformed nearly enough for us to confidently say that it's now a beautiful, equal partnership for women. And as we've established already, it's not an individual choice free from social implications and state pressure. It remains a tool for the system. Women specifically have been systemically placed as second to man. They've been made economically dependent on man via marriage. They've been blocked from the workforce, given lower wages, fed propaganda to make them feel their life goal is domestic labour, and so on. As Simone de Beauvoir puts it, women are othered. They are the other, the secondary aspect of humanity whose fate men have decided, and that fate is to be consigned to an accessory role. Yes, modern laws have improved the position of woman, but the systems made to oppress women have not been abolished or even significantly reformed. Women are still other. They are still expected and even encouraged to return to domesticity via marriage. They are told to sacrifice themselves in order to return to the status quo. Sure, most of our marriages in the West today are not arranged, but they are still encouraged and moulded by the state. The system we currently have still places women in Anri's position. Second to a man, a tool for climbing the social ladder. We have divorce laws now, reproductive rights, and a focus on love and consent, but all of those things are being threatened in our current political landscape. Oppressive states are trying to make the line between us and Anri even more transparent, because the laws they've given can just as easily be taken away. To say marriage is entirely different today than it was in history due to the onset of progressive laws is to put too much faith in a system of justice that has always been used to oppress. There is no dialogue or interaction wherein Anri consents to this union. It's more than likely she was assassinated by Londor, perhaps the Londor Shade, and promptly placed at the altar, ready for your arrival. She becomes trapped in a contract she never decided to make, much like women of history have been forced and trapped inside marriages they never chose. She is killed, her face, her identity, is covered. She's no longer her own person, allowed to have her own agency. She's been chosen as a human sacrifice that you need in order to become Lord. She loses herself so that you can find yourself, and whilst this could be a beautiful mutual union, it isn't, because she didn't choose this. The idea of finding yourself in another, finding a mutual loving partnership and surrendering your personality is beautiful. But how is this meant to be the reality for women within a system of marriage historically meant to subjugate them, make them property, and confine them to domestic labour? Marriage is taught to us as fantasy. We yearn for this concept of a mutual loss of self, but there is nothing mutual in a system of union historically built to keep women down. Good marriages exist, but that's not due to the marriage itself, it's due to two people loving each other. The work has not been done to significantly change the modern institution from plain and simple subordination, as we see with Anri, to a system of mutual affection and genuine companionship. Those traits occurring within marriage have nothing to do with the fact the spouses are married, and everything to do with their individual choices and love. Some people think Anri's bow in the cutscene signifies her consenting to be your wife, but I doubt this interpretation. Imagine being assassinated, reviving as all undead do, and now suddenly you're the wife of the new god of Lothric. You've been chosen for this feminine role, the subjugated partner of a powerful leader. How are you supposed to say no? The union has already been consummated without your knowledge, and the entire community of Londor has gathered for the succession of the new lord. Anri has already been assassinated once. Who says it won't happen again if she attempts to reject this arranged fate? Thus, Anri has no choice but to accept what's happened to her, to accept this arrangement as is, much like women of the past have had to accept arrangements made for them. But is this only a problem for women of the past? What about the women of today trapped in abusive unions, the parents confined to unhappy marriages for the sake of children who can tell their parents are not happy? Due to the social stigma around divorce and the pressure to make marriages work, among other factors, these spouses are all trapped in unions they feel they must accept. Let me remind you all that no-fault divorce was only legalised in 2022 in the UK, and still divorce is a long, tedious and especially challenging prospect for mothers made economically dependent on unloving men. Again, we can see marriage as self-sacrifice. You are pressured to make an ill-matched union work because marriage is placed on a societal pedestal, as it is in archaic Londor. I find this fate, this reduction of woman into subordinated other, very profound when it comes to Anri, because Anri is not a damsel in distress we meet along the way with no desires of her own. She's a warrior with a purpose, a survivor. She's just as capable as we are, yet we reduce her to a silent, bowing figure within a sea of others. And by marrying her, she isn't able to complete her mission of hunting Aldrich. Her questline is cut short and her mission goes unfulfilled. We take away all of her agency. We turn her into a tool for our ascension. It makes you think of all the women in history we don't know about because they were pressured into marital conformity. It makes you think of mothers and peers who've let go of careers, passions, and dreams for the same reason. Some may argue this is a better outcome than the other part of her questline. If we help her kill Aldrich, she goes hollow and no longer has a purpose. But that's basically what happens to Sigurd, and nobody thinks he'd be better off marrying us instead of being allowed to fulfill his life goal and then pass away. Why does he deserve agency, but our bride does not? Why is his goal more valuable than Anri's? I think the reason people overlook this comparison is because marriage is seen as the final destination for adult life, especially for women. We take away Anri's agency and goal of revenge, but, well, we place her into the societally correct box, the female destiny of marriage, so who cares that she had no say in the matter? Sigurd has the right to pave his own path, to forge his own goals and forge his own life. Anri is only lent that autonomy until someone finds a use for her body. The reality is, our Western institution of marriage is still a patriarchal system that harms women. The presentation of this marriage in Dark Souls is not only relevant to historical discussion, it's a reflection of our current institution and a criticism of it. It brings us, the player, directly into the picture. We are the hand of oppression using Anri to further our own goals of becoming Lord, subordinating her in the process, and preventing her from fulfilling her life goal. We have to ask, how far can marriage outgrow its patriarchal past, as Elizabeth Blake puts it? How far from Anri's marriage are we today? It's still the wide consensus that a woman's destiny is to marry and have children. Even though women are allowed their own wills and careers, they are expected, at some point, to discard such foolish ideas to become a real woman and bear children. Much like how Anri has to discard her individuality and her goals in order to bow to us as wife. Overall, our marriage with Anri is framed by a historical lens due to the time frame of Dark Souls, but it's still relevant as a criticism of our modern day, because modern-day marriage has not shed its patriarchal skin. As with motherhood, I don't think marriage is always a bad thing, and I think it can be something valuable and beautiful. I get comments from people who clearly haven't watched more than 5 minutes of my content, asking me why I hate femininity or motherhood, or in this case, marriage, but as I try to make clear, I do not hate these things. I don't even dislike them, nor do I dislike men. I am actually someone who wants to get married, to a man. But these systems and social framings need reform. They need to be inclusive, freeing, and loving. They need to be far from images of our union with Anri. Amatonormativity limits expressions of love and pressures people to conform to a system of marriage that is still rife with oppression. That doesn't mean we should destroy the concept of marriage, but we should let it be individually molded and thusly livable. Now, of course, Anri is not only a female NPC, as I mentioned. Her gender changes depending on yours, so we'll be moving on to view marital criticism through a male perspective. First, though, let me quickly remind you all to subscribe, and please let me know how you feel about this more character-specific video. I usually cover broad topics, but analysing a single character/topic like this is a much smaller workload for me to deal with in between larger projects. So if you like this one, do let me know. Also, come join us on the Discord so we can reach 1,000 members. Check out the Twitch streams if you'd like, and of course, thank you to everyone who supported me on Ko-fi. You guys are genuinely amazing. Now, let's get back to the video. As we know, Anri isn't only a woman, she also appears as a man if your character is female. Thus, the commentary on marriage is twofold, and not only a reflection of women's marital reality. But first, let's talk about Anri's whole gender thing. I mentioned briefly in a previous video that this is a strength of her character, because her quest doesn't change whether she be man or woman. It shows us that both these genders can occupy the same roles, undertake the same tasks, and both be sacrifices for some greater plan. The message I've always tried to spread in my videos from literally day one is exactly this. Your gender is only important in regards to how it interacts with existing social structures. Your limitations, your stereotypes, your designated possibilities, none of these are intrinsic to your gender, because we are more similar than we are different. The same concept is applicable to race, class, and any other social designator. We are all human. I like that Anri reminds us of this, but I'd be attempting some next-level glaze if I didn't admit that her gender is the way it is due to heteronormativity. Was this done maliciously by the creators of Dark Souls 3? I don't think so, especially since there's a great deal of queer subject matter in Elden Ring. It is what it is. But I think this reminds us of the core of media interpretation. Yes, the gender switching was likely intended as a simple reflection of heteronormativity, but from this overall presentation we can form deeper, more meaningful interpretations, such as how we're more similar than different. Similarly, we can use this character as a lens to criticize the marital status quo from both a male and female perspective. As we've established, marriage in the current day remains a patriarchal institute and an important debate within feminism. Historically, it's hurt women, and the harmful roots in which the institution grew have not been dug out. Dark Souls 3 explores this concept with Anri by presenting marriage as an act of sacrifice, a means to climb the social ladder and meet the expectations of your community. Love is not important here, only image and status, and that is still the case for many modern marriages. The divorce rate alone informs us of that reality. But this isn't simply a woman's issue. Feminism and patriarchy are not only about women. That's a common and terribly detrimental misconception that continues to hamper feminism. As Bell Hooks says, we have to do so much work to correct the assumption deeply embedded in the cultural psyche that feminism is anti-male. By criticizing marriage, this game is not saying, nor am I, that women alone need to find alternatives to this form of companionship. I'm not blaming men for the ills of marriage. I'm blaming the patriarchal system that, despite historically benefiting from, hurts men too. Let's see how Anri as a male character highlights this for us. The historical lens we've been using throughout the video is not very relevant in exploring how marriage harms men because, historically, it has not. This institution was formed to place men at the helm of the household. It gave him the freedom of the provider role, whilst his wife was the subordinated other, forced into domesticity and often inescapable abuse. She was his property, and often little more than a warm body. Men, historically, have received more perks from marriage than their female counterparts. But times have changed, haven't they? Men no longer have access to this provider and protector role, yet traditional marriage insists they will achieve it, must achieve it to be a socially valued man. One wage in our current state of capitalism is not enough to provide for a mother and children, not to mention that the protector role was never anything more than an aspect of traditional strongman masculinity. Female subjugation should not be mistaken for male protection. Marriage, then, is sold as fantasy for men too. They are promised a socially valuable role, they are told they will become real men, but a marriage certificate does nothing to craft an individual's personality. Just as the certificate does not instantly create love or morality, it does not provide men the masculine fantasy sold to them. It instead pushes men to conform further to this crushing yet impossible force of traditional masculinity, just as it pushes women to conform to traditional femininity. The pressure to provide and be a real man is also a form of self-sacrifice, because the system sanctioning your marriage is the same system that prevents you from being able to live comfortably with a family. For men, traditional marriage still places them in Anri's position, lying atop a sacrificial slab, slave to a state that only wants to use you as an extension of itself. Anri as a man is not being used as a tool by us specifically like she is as a woman, but instead as a tool for society, for Londor, just as our current society uses men as blunt objects. It promises them a great patriarchal myth, a relationship where they are the protector of a household, but these promises are entirely empty. The status quo does not benefit the average man, regardless of whatever fantasy the state tells us. The concept of men as societal tools is very compelling to me. Of course, today everyone is used as a tool by the state. We are used for our labour and given little in return. But men specifically have been conditioned into constant work due to this false provider role. They are fed to wars, they are made to feel less than if they cannot meet the impossible expectation of societal value. Is it any wonder that my generation of men are falling more and more to grifters and right-wing politics? The concept of a return to ideal masculinity is absurdly appealing to the youth who never had a chance to be traditionally valued, and yet they were promised such a thing regardless. But like Londor, this form of politics promises a fantasy. It intends to return to a greatness that never was. Being a protector and provider was never an ideal placement, especially when plenty of men arrived at positions simply from social expectation, not personal choice. Your identity as a man is erased by this kind of thinking. Like Anri, you have a cloth over your face. Your personal image is discarded and replaced by the societal norm, the protector and provider. Why should we seek a return to this, when we could instead seek unions and marriages based in personal identity and choice? Our men and boys, they too are placed on the slab where we find Anri. He would have little reason to say no to this union, as with his female counterpart, because traditional marriage is sold to us as the proper destination for moral relationships. Londor would expect him to fall into this role, whether it be with us or another, to become a real man, a protector and tool for society. But as we've established, this superior masculine role no longer exists for the average man. All that remains is a facade of male superiority. Sticking to the status quo provides men only one true reality: your work and body are being used to make the richest men richer. Anri will not find personal fulfillment by accepting this union, but Londor will benefit from his labour, his adherence to their status quo. Men in our day, too, will struggle to find fulfillment by adhering to false promises, but the capitalist elite will benefit from his quiet acceptance of their lies. His false sense of superiority will be carried to his children, and thus the status quo will be instilled through family values, and all that was gained was a life lived blind. Thus, Anri bowing to us in the final cutscene can be read as a man bowing to societal expectations, the accepted social order. He gains nothing from this blind acceptance. Despite the lies of masculine superiority, he is subordinated, kneeling to a system that no longer gives him stability, meaning, or identity. He is kneeling to an empty promise, for, as we know, Londor is nothing more than the next iteration of Gwyn's rule. The modern-day promises of the state, the return to masculinity, the restoration of women and marriage, it's all an elaborate lie, an appeal to discarded, desperate men who don't know how to look within themselves for value. Anri's personal goal of defeating Aldrich becomes irrelevant, for this marital duty is the true purpose of man, the true signifier of his social value. His personal, individual goals are irrelevant in the face of a moral union between two partners, the state-sanctioned acceptable relationship. Why would you seek personal fulfillment or non-conformist partnerships when society has told you that you must marry, that it's the only valuable form of relationship? And yes, men historically have had to give up less than women when it comes to this union, but they too must change and self-sacrifice in order to meet masculine expectations, particularly in the modern day as the fantasy of the transcendent providing man fizzles out. There are plenty of men who may be feminine, may not want children, may desire non-conformist unions, who've been pressured into traditional marriages to appease community or simply to feel like they are living life correctly. Their goals, like Anri's, must be sacrificed in order to meet these expectations, just as their identities must be put aside. So we have to ask, is this what we want marriages to be? Should they be state-sanctioned unions of conformity where both women and men feel as though they are placing themselves upon sacrificial slabs in order to do marriage the right way? Where they are used as tools by each other and by society at large? Should they be impersonal? Should there be a blueprint for a correct form of marriage? Or should we aim to create unions based on freedom, consent, and individual needs? Should our marriages be metaphorically akin to a sacrificial stabbing, our identities hidden from our spouse? Or should they be something more? Overall, whilst a lot of the systemic commentary we can see from a female Anri is not dually applicable to a male because the system does put men above women, the emotional and interpersonal commentary is still just as relevant. Men can be trapped in bad marriages. Men, too, are victims to the lies of patriarchy. They are pressured to conform to traditional masculinity, when such a thing is unlivable for a huge chunk of the population. Many men, like women, do not want marriage, do not want to be forced into an amatonormative relationship, yet societal pressure tries to sway them from their own desires in order to meet a traditional expectation, in order to become a real man. Men should have the choice to be what they truly want to be, without outside pressure from a system that harms them, that harms us all. They should not have to sacrifice their own fulfillment for the sake of societal expectations. They should seek a mutually fulfilling relationship, as we all should, and that often doesn't come in the pre-made package of marriage. I haven't tried to list alternatives to this system, nor am I going to now, because why would I try to replace one expectation with another? Everyone should be able to choose their own freeing, livable unions. They shouldn't have to be pressed upon a sacrificial altar in order to become a moral human being, a true incarnation of their gender. Just like motherhood, I do believe that marriage can be a beautiful companionship, and there's plenty of modern marriages made within the flawed system that have worked out well. There is a version of marriage, a system of it wherein we and Anri can have a compassionate union based on love, not conformity. Like all of my discussions, I don't mean to say that this is the worst thing in the entire world and that we should destroy the concept of marriage, but we do need to reform it to be more freeing, reform it into a site of actual love and companionship. Thank you all for watching as usual, especially if you've made it all the way to the end, because trust me, that's statistically impressive. As I've been mentioning recently, I am streaming again, so please do come over and join us on the Twitch. We just hit 1k, so thank you everyone who's gone over there already. Also come join us on the Discord, and of course support me on Ko-fi if you'd like. But that is all for today, so thank you again, and goodbye.